Joining me here in the studio to talk more about this is attorney Daniel Pomerantz. Daniel, thank you so much for being here with me.
My pleasure.
Let's first talk about this new preoccupation that Mueller seems to have with Kushner's ties with Israel, specifically with this UN resolution. What is Mueller looking for, and could Kushner really have broken a law here?
Well, it's important to be clear that the investigation of a special prosecutor has a broad scope. So he might not be looking for any criminal activity by Kushner. He might just be looking for additional information. Or he might be looking for some criminal offense that would allow him to bring a charge against Kushner, which would in turn cause Kushner to flip and give information relating to the other charges that are more central to his investigation. Now, if Kushner were to have broken a law, the most obvious candidates would be, there's the Logan Act, which is a law that prohibits negotiating with foreign governments, having a dispute with the U.S., or trying to defeat U.S. measures. But this becomes a big stretch because technically the UN resolution 2334 was not a U.S. measure. America didn't introduce it and didn't even vote for it. That was intentional, was part of a diplomatic game the U.S. was playing. So it's one of these things we all know it was a U.S. measure, but to prove that in court, you would need to interview people from the prior administration, and the hurdle is tremendous. Plus, it doesn't really fit with Mueller's overall strategic approach. The other possibility is that in order to get a security clearance, Kushner would have had to fill out an SF-86 form. In it, he has to disclose his relationships and interactions with foreign nationals. And this is somebody who does real estate internationally and has for years. So there's tons of people he's interacted with. Some names have been left off, and eventually those have been added later. The key is that if you violate the SF-86 by willfully leaving off names, and that's the key. He has to have intentionally left off a name, not just by accident.
Right.
Then that could be a criminal offense. But again, proving that he did something intentionally is a pretty high hurdle.
Right, and Mueller already interested in Kushner because of these meetings that he had with Russian officials, which initially he did not disclose.
Right, he had any meeting with Russian officials becomes of interest here, and a meeting that wasn't disclosed. If it wasn't disclosed by accident, it may not violate the law. If it was not disclosed on purpose, it may violate the law. Now, the question is why all of this interest in meeting with Russian officials? In order to understand the strategy of a special prosecutor, you have to think like a lawyer, which is different than thinking like a politician or even a journalist who digs for information but digs in a different way than a lawyer does. A lawyer first has to ask himself or herself what laws could have actually been broken here, and what are the legal standards that would involve breaking that law that you would have to prove. Now, the most obvious candidates here are a law against foreign nationals making contributions to American political campaigns. The other possible candidate is whether there was any obstruction of justice in Trump's firing of James Comey, the former FBI director. Now,
Right.
proving both of those, it sounds like it maybe is an obvious thing, but both of those involved a concept called mens rea, which is Latin for state of mind. You have to prove what the president was subjectively thinking in his mind at the time he took certain actions. That's one of the hardest things for a lawyer to prove. And that's why a special prosecutor has to reach out to any number of different people. In my opinion, the most significant action that happened so far in this investigation was the indictment of Paul Manafort. Now, he's a businessman, Trump's former campaign manager, and he was involved in doing some business in the Ukraine. And he was indicted, so it created this big splash in the media. Campaign manager indicted. It seems like it's game over. It was money laundering, tax evasion. Not great if you're Paul, but has nothing to do with the campaign, which raises the question, why is Mueller interested at all? And the answer is that if you can start bringing people on board to the investigation.
Right, to flip them to become a state witness, to basically feed you information about the person you really want to go after.
Exactly. And that's why I think that Mueller, if anything, is looking at the SF-86. It's much easier to prove. The legal standards are much more straightforward. And again, it's all part of this all-encompassing process of building as much information as you can in order to allow yourself to prove this very difficult mens rea, or state of mind, of what the president was thinking at the time certain things happened.
Thank you so much. We do know the president mentioned that Russia was part of the reason he fired Comey in that interview with NBC, with Lester Holt.
He did mention it was part of it.
Yeah.
Do we have time to go into that?
No, we have to leave it there. But thank you so much, Daniel Pomerantz, an attorney. Stay with us.